Hello, I hope you're well. This is a video in response to the accusation, "You're so negative." I'm going to quote from someone who gave me the idea to do this video, and so here goes. "I've been told nearly all my life that I am so negative. After taking this as criticism and adding it to my why I'm defective list to be replayed at 3 a.m. most mornings, in recent years the truth started to come to light. I'm not negative, I'm autistic." Indeed. No, I'm not negative. I'm realistic. Same thing. Unfiltered video. I'm not a negative. I'm realistic. I think it bears repeating. So why are we considered as being negative when we're just being realistic? We're saying things as we consider them to be. I've got a few points on my list, and the first one is war. Why am I negative / realistic? Well, I'm upset by war and I draw attention to war. I have been doing since my early 20s. And I think people have thought that I'm just being unnecessarily negative because I've perhaps hyper-focused on war. Now, I got involved in politics before the Iraq War began. And I remember when Colin Powell, otherwise known as Colin Powell, gave a speech at the UN making the case for invading and relentlessly bombing Iraq. And I burst into tears. I think this was February 2003. I burst into tears, way before I knew I'm autistic, because I knew for a fact that lots and lots of people were going to be killed, and it was entirely avoidable. So my logical brain, my autistic brain, was saying, "Don't do that, because lots of people are going to get killed. This is about greed and power." At the expense of so many innocent people. Now, I think people would have said at the time, and will say so now, why did I spend so much time getting worried about a conflict thousands of miles away that doesn't directly affect me? Well, because I care about people. It doesn't matter whether they're in the same room as me or whether they're 1,000 miles away or 10,000 miles away. If I think they're going to get hurt, that's going to bother me. If they do get hurt, or worse, that's going to bother me even more. Am I being negative for having those views, that response, that empathy that apparently I don't have? I'm not being negative. I'm being realistic. I'm facing the truth head on. I think that's the point about, I'm generalizing about autistic people, but we want the truth. We want the clarity. And if the truth is unpleasant, then, we're not going to run away from it. We're going to try to make sense of it. And if it's an unpleasant truth, an unpleasant episode, then we're going to do what we can to prevent a repeat of that unpleasant episode, because we don't want people to be hurt. So I'm not being negative for the sake of it. If I hear about war and, with the genocide going on in Gaza, and I know other genocides going on and have gone on, I can't just dismiss that reality. I just can't help but face it, and it makes me miserable. And people think, "Oh, well, you're miserable. You're being negative. Why not just sort of flick a switch and don't watch the news?" And I just can't. So I don't think I'm being negative. I'm being realistic about what's happening in the world to hopefully help myself, help the world become better. Linked to that is climate change / climate breakdown. And I've got in brackets Greta Thunberg. Now, Greta Thunberg started a solo protest outside her school in Sweden. And I think perhaps people would have said about her at the time, and are saying or have said since she started that protest, "Oh, you're being very negative. Why not just enjoy your youth?" I mean, she's only in her early 20s now. Chill out, Greta. Stop being so negative. Well, and I'm using Greta. I'm referring to Greta Thunberg because she's autistic, and I think she's an inspiration. And she says the same things again and again. She doesn't sugarcoat the truth. she points out what's happening. She's being realistic. She said, if this is what's happening to the world because of the harm caused by mainly rich people who apparently believe that they can hunker down and avoid the consequences of climate breakdown, or get in a spaceship and live permanently on another world, although they'd probably destroy that one as well. And then I'd have to find another one, and it would be endless. So Greta Thunberg, as to pick an example of an autistic person and for me to relate it to climate breakdown, she is realistic. She's not negative. The truth is negative about, because we're causing harm to the world. To avoid that truth, you could argue is being negative, because you're never ever going to do something about the impending doom. Is negative to yourself by avoiding the truth. As depressing as the truth might be, it's negative to avoid it, because you're ultimately going to lead to harm to yourself. So, people would say the same about me, or, if they ever think about me at all, they will say, oh, you're negative, you're miserable about the climate, chill out, it's a nice day, just get on with your day. No, because I trust in the climate scientists, and Greta Thunberg is just one person, albeit a very famous person now, who's echoing what climate scientists who've spent their lives studying the climate have been saying for decades now. I think we ought to listen to them. I like facts. Because if I know where I stand, if I can make informed decisions, I'm more likely to be safe. And that could not apply to anything more than it does to the climate, and stopping climate breakdown. Completely unrelated to climate breakdown, I've got on my list going out. Why have I connected that to climate breakdown? Well, there is no connection, other than the fact that going out can make me very anxious, and people looking at me, like, listening to me moan, or going on my external appearance, might think that I'm just being negative for the sake of it. I mean, you're going out, you're having fun. Let your hair down, just have fun. But of course, now I know that I'm autistic, and I go out less now, because I try to look after myself, because I know going out means that, there are sensory challenges, noisy environments, smells, random behavior that I can minimize completely by not going out at all. But occasionally I can't just stay indoors. I have to go out. And that, just saying that out loud, makes me seem very miserable, very negative. But, I'm autistic, and I find that when I'm outside the house, going to, a party, or meeting people in a pub, or going to a meeting, I'm not in control of so many factors. And it's not about me wanting to control everything. It's about me wanting to anticipate what's about to happen, and to prepare myself, because I'm autistic. I like to know what's coming, and I like to know that I'm going to be safe. And people just would see that as me being negative and a killjoy. No, I'm just being realistic about my autistic needs. I have a different brain. I'm trying to look after myself. I'm not being negative. I'm not being a misery just to make you miserable. You're making me miserable and feel negative by not taking into account my own needs. So, going out, I think, deserves its place on my list. Being alone, which is often misconstrued as being unhappy. So I think, it's realistic to assume that autistic people will want to spend a lot of time on their own. And that's not because they're negative people and they hate humanity. It's because they like the control of their environment. There's a lot going on in their brain. There's a lot going on in the outside world. Being alone is a way of is a space and time to process what's going on in the outside world, and time and space to process what's going on in our own minds. It's not a comment on other people. Well, I'd say usually. I mean, if you need to be alone, literally to run away from harm, then that's obviously something different. But to speak for myself, you know, I spend a lot of time on my own, making these videos, for example, or editing them. I won't edit this one, or not too much. I'll put some chapters in again. I don't think people would say, "Why are you hiding? What are you hiding from?" I'm not hiding. I just enjoy spending lots of time on my own. Um, I'm being realistic about my needs now because I now know I'm autistic. And I think if you don't know you're autistic, you will force yourself to conform with the neurotypical majority and you'll make yourself miserable. So you need to be realistic about what you can manage. And being alone so often means that I can manage more in a world that's not designed for me. It's designed for neurotypical people. So I hope that deserves its place on my list as well, my not negative but realistic autistic list. In very scant preparation for this video, I googled autism and realism, and sadly, unfortunately, I learned about the Autism Reality Experience / Virtual Dementia Tour bus. And I thought I'd include it in this video to highlight how horrific this concept is in my view. I mean, how can you have a bus that encapsulates the whole autistic experience? I mean, its existence suggests that there is one version of autism. Autism is a spectrum. It's a palette of traits. That bus is not going to replicate the entire palette. And even if it could, that would be dismissing the fact that an autistic person, a single autistic person, has their own unique collection of autistic traits that make them who they are. So you can't have an autistic experience because there isn't just one autistic experience. A virtual dementia tour. I mean, surely, and I'm not the expert, clearly. I mean, this is an autism YouTube channel. So I'm saying clearly, I'm guessing that one person's experience of dementia is entirely different to the next person's experience of dementia. So how can you have a virtual dementia tour? It's going to be a generalization, just as the autism reality experience will be. And generalizations, and I've given one myself at the start of the video, I will confess to that. But my point is that generalizations can feed stereotypes, and stereotypes are harmful because they breed ignorance. And ignorance means that people are less likely to accept autistic people for who they are and to help them locate support. And then I googled autism negative, and the National Autistic Society included this quote from an autistic YouTuber called Purple Ella. Well, that's not her real name, obviously. And it's a good quote. It goes like this. I'm not on stage. Catastrophizing is when you are anxious about a situation and that anxiety leads your brain to ruminate on a potentially disastrous outcome. Is it any wonder that autistic people catastrophize? Is it any wonder that they contemplate all sorts of potential scenarios? Because autistic people want to see the sense in things. That's a generalization, but I think it holds true for most autistic people. They want to know what are the facts, what's the truth. Catastrophizing is linked to that need for coherence and truth and being able to prepare for what might happen next. And because we like to think things through, a downside of that is that we contemplate all sorts of scenarios, and that can unfortunately lead to catastrophizing. But I think it's grounded in being realistic about what might happen. You might argue otherwise, and perhaps if I had scripted this, I'd come up with a more coherent and sensible explanation of what I'm trying to say. But part of the fun of doing these videos is by just talking in relation to a very succinct list, I might conjure up some sense that I might otherwise not have come up with. But hopefully I have made some sense there, that catastrophizing isn't entirely illogical. It's coming from a place of well, what if that happens? What if that happens? What if that happens? Because as autistic people, we do that anyway, because we live in a world that's not designed for us, and we're always on our guard for what might happen, so that we can be as safe as possible, and we mask to blend in as much as possible, although we never fully achieve that because we're autistic. And catastrophizing is linked to that, trying to anticipate what might happen next so that we can blend in as much as possible. Hopefully that makes sense to you. And why wouldn't we catastrophize if, having experienced years of being mistreated, ignored, misrepresented by neurotypical people in the main, why wouldn't we catastrophize? Why wouldn't that be a habit of thinking when we've been mistreated so often? We've had previous experience. So we're thinking, well, if that happened so many times before, it might happen again. And you could argue, well, that's not even catastrophizing, it's being realistic, because a good indicator of what might happen in the future is what happened in the past. So I'm not catastrophizing by thinking, oh, crikey, that might happen. I'm thinking, I've been mistreated so many times in the past. It's just realistic. It's not negative for me to think that might happen again, or something similar might happen again. So hopefully, as I've said twice now already, at least, catastrophizing has a connection with being realistic from an autistic point of view. It's not just an autistic person being negative for the sake of it. So I hope that was fun. Thank you to whoever made the suggestion. Possibly ought to have put your name down on my list. I'm sorry. It'll be on the comments page or underneath the video, one of my more recent ones, or in the community page. Thank you again. I really possibly had more fun thinking about this video and talking to camera than you have had watching the video. But let me just end by asking again, if you've got any suggestions for future videos, or you have any comments about what I've been wittering on about, then please do add them in the chat or email them to me. Always looking for ideas for future videos about autism and people's autistic experiences. I'm obviously trying to relate it from my own personal, unique autistic point of view. I'm not here to speak for all autistic people. I never have been and never will. If you want to pass on any suggestions or comments, you know where to do that. Thank you again for bearing with me. Please take care between now and when I upload another video. And yeah, thanks again. Bye.